Hey there, Banditos. Welcome back to the second part of One of Us Week. I'm Mike Farah. This is the Dollar Bin Bandits, and today we are talking to another crew of comic book podcasters, YouTubers. Say what you want. They get into the realm of Marvel Comics. They do it monthly. Thus, they are Marvel by the month. Yes, we are talking today to Robb Milne, Bryan Stratton, and Jamie Wenger. And what can I say? If you haven't checked out their show, Marvel by the Month, it's a great program. They go month by month. They're going through the history of Marvel Comics, looking at what was put out that month, diving deep into some of the issues, looking for trends, themes, and they have guests that often come on and talk about certain things that are happening during those eras of Marvel. So let's understand how they put the program together, what some of their favorite moments are, some of their favorite guests, and we're talking with Marvel by the Month. The co-hosts behind Marvel by the Month, it is Rob, Bryan, and Jamie. How are you guys doing?
Great.
Hey,
Yeah.
doing all
Yeah.
right. How
Great
you
to be
doing,
here.
Michael?
I'm doing great. I'm very excited to talk Marvel by the Month and just comics in general because, that's our passion. That's what we do here. That's what you
Yeah.
guys do. So let's all do it
Absolutely.
together.
It's the pit we've all fallen into. Yeah.
Exactly. So we're going to start off with our unpatented first question, which is how did each of you discover comics?
Oh boy.
Well, Rob, you're the oldest one, so why don't you go
Yeah.
first?
Okay.
That could be our system
Yeah.
moving forward, just so
There you
My
go.
Rob feels the
yeah.
oldest constantly.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's good to remind me. My arthritic back doesn't. Anyway, the my dad was a collector, so I mean he was a reader, I guess more. So he bought copies to read, but he followed a lot of titles. So he we had comics around from the time I was a little kid, and I remember, vividly remember being 4 years old and holding like Claremont Byrne X-Men comic in my hand, and that was registering as this is my thing at that point. I just figured out reading, and I was already like, this is the best version of reading. So that's mine. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, as for me, I got into comics, I think the way that a lot of folks get into comics, which is through licensed comics. A comic shop had opened up in my hometown, and they one Halloween, I think the first Halloween they were open, any kid who showed up in costume, instead of giving out candy, they were like, you can take a comic off the shelves. So I picked up a copy of Transformers. I think it was number 13. And I was basically hooked from that point. And yeah, like got into it through Transformers, and then because Marvel was publishing that, there was an issue that had Spider-Man in it, and I was like, "Whoa, Spider-Man's wearing a black costume. What's that all about?" And then
Ooh.
the rest is history. Yeah.
Put you firmly in the 80s. Yeah.
Yes,
There's
exactly.
no
Yep, yep.
there's no doubt.
I have
Jamie.
my answer is two pronged. One is I definitely found a box of my dad's mostly DC, but a little bit of Fantastic Four and Spider-Man in a closet tucked way back, and systematically destroyed each one of them by getting the tape. You know, how the bags are taped shut. When taking them out, it scraped against the tape every time, and I ruined like just so many like Death of Gwen Stacy level comics. Um, but yeah, I love that stuff. And then some point I got a two pack of X-Men comics from a department store named Caldor, which I feel like nobody remembers, but
I
sounds
remember
appropriately comic
Caldor.
booky. Do you really? Right on. I
Yeah.
love Caldor.
Where'd you grow up?
Long Island, way out east.
Yeah, I was in Westchester.
Oh, right
So
on.
obviously it must have been a New York thing.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and it was a two pack of X-Men comics around when Professor Xavier was off with the Shi'ar and the Skrulls, and I had one where Gambit and Wolverine were fighting on the cover, and I was like, I need to know everything about this.
Yes. I remember that issue very well. You would think, by the way, that they would have come up with some technology, some taping technology, in the intervening years that would have like, canceled out the possibility of like tearing off pieces of your comic while taking them out. But we just haven't
Yeah,
seemed to
is
have
that
gotten
that is
there.
Right. That problem is exactly the same as it was 43 years ago. Like it
Right.
that we've
Yeah,
made no progress there.
I'm convinced the publishers are in on it. It's like, I mean, if you ruin one copy, it's like, oh, I guess you're
Right.
gonna have to buy another one, kid.
Yeah, maybe
Exactly.
the
Yeah.
auction houses
Yep.
too. Yeah, so that
Yep.
they can drive up the prices.
There you go.
All right. We're gonna put AI on this and come back to it.
I feel
Um,
like Velcro. Why isn't Velcro the answer? It seems like an easy, like, right? Little
yeah,
Velcro. Boop, boop.
yeah. Although
Yep.
Velcro gets like sort of dusty, it picks up stuff where you're at. But I guess if
That's
you keep
true.
things in a very clean way, you should be good with Velcro. I don't know. Maybe it's making a comeback. But let's talk about the podcast and talk about you guys meeting. First of all, were you friends, acquaintances before the podcast, or was the podcast how you all came together?
Well, Rob and I started the show in May of '99, May of 2019. Sorry, I always make that mistake. Yeah, we had been working together at different like digital marketing agencies around Portland since I think 20 2009,
2009,
2010, something
2010.
like
Yeah.
that. And then he and I had eventually spun off and started our own little company, and that was fun. We had a decent ride with it, and then it ran its course. And but we had kind of gotten used to hanging out with each other every day, and now we didn't have an excuse to do that. And like right around that time, um, I had started getting into podcasts in a really big way, and Marvel Unlimited had just kind of really started hitting its stride. Like this is around 2016, 2017, and I'm like, we could conceivably read every Marvel comic and then talk about them. And it was an excuse to hang out. So we did that. We made a run at it a couple times and didn't love the results. And then in 2019, we were like, okay, let's really do it this time. And we still weren't very good for like 3 dozen episodes, but then we figured it
Takes a
out.
while.
So yeah, yeah.
Was Marvel always going to be the focus, and specifically this, chronological project, or did you guys bandy about a number of different ideas?
I feel like that was always the concept. It took us a long time to come up with the name, which it seems like it should be exactly the opposite. Like the name should have been easy, and the concept should have been hard. But yeah, I think it was again just because like Marvel Unlimited existed, and the idea of reading every Marvel comic in order was just this very compelling idea that really captured our imagination.
Yeah, it was a very Man of La Mancha moment. When we decided we're going to do this, we're just going to load our brains full of it. And I think also it 1961 seemed more approachable than the
Mm.
entirety of DC. DC by the month, as we've talked about with a number of comics creators, would be it just we would I don't know that we'd be hitting any stride of anything that anyone cared about even now, after this many, after 300 episodes, we would be just still nestled way at the beginning of the golden age. So yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. We'd be somewhere like during the Korean War right now, and it's like, oh, this is just not getting better quickly. Yeah.
That
It's so
that totally
crazy that
makes
like
sense.
the birth of that app was such a big moment. Like I don't remember it happening. I like that just seems like because that was literally a dream come true. Like when you're younger, all you
Yeah.
want is to be able to do that. And I feel like the first moment I heard of like, wait, unlimited Marvel comics, all I want forever and ever would have been this like lightning rod thing. And I don't remember the day I learned it existed.
Yeah, I don't. And I know that Jamie, you and I, so we met through mutual friends, and I always tell the story as we were at a party. Jamie and I started talking about comics, started talking about X-Men, and one by one, everyone else peeled off, over time with boredom, and
Rough
until it was
party.
just Jamie and I. Yeah.
Yeah, we cleared a room.
Yep. And then and then we'd had Jamie on as a guest, I think 4 times in the first 100 episodes. And as we were approaching the 100th episode, and when we started doing the show, it was like, oh, we'll talk about an issue or two an episode because that's all that Marvel was putting out superhero wise, in the early months. And then it started being, it's like, okay, now we're getting up to like 4 or 5. It's like, this is still manageable. And then, Marvel reached that point where they were no longer under the thumb of DC as their distributor. And so their title count was able to explode. And so all of a sudden we were like, oh boy, this is now becoming a real chore. And we're like, I think what we need is a third host. I think we need someone to kind of, kind of balance the workload a little bit, but also like the conversation and the banter works better with 3 people than it does with 2 people. Even though Rob and I are very good friends and basically the same person. Like we,
We have a hard time shutting up at all, ever.
yeah,
So, yeah.
yeah, and it was sort of like, well, who, we had a short list of folks to reach out to, and Jamie was at the top of the list. He'd done the show 4 times. He was fun. He added a different energy to the whole thing. He loved comics, but he was from like a slightly different era of Marvel comics, so that provided some nice friction there. And yeah, and so we brought him in with episode 100 as a co-host, and then we didn't let him talk to any guests for a year.
Hazing.
And
That
then,
seems so
and
funny in retrospect.
I know, and I don't even think it was an intentional thing, but it was just like it kept working out that way. And then we're like, yeah, he's not a junior partner. He's as much a part of this thing as either of us is.
Yeah, we
So,
would
yeah.
have like the 3 of us would have this like we'd have an awesome recording. We'd be having laughs and saying what felt like very smart things at the time. And I was like, we would leave and get this kind of it was like a high. And then they'd be like, yeah, all right, so we won't see you next week because we're going to be recording with someone famous, but we'll call you next time, Brad. And I was like, all right, I guess that's cool.
Well,
So we
it's always
rectified
good to
that
have a
eventually.
third person there to break the tie, as it were. Even though you guys, I'm sure, agree on 90% of everything. It's always good to have sort of the next sort of opinion, either agreeing or disagreeing. So I think that works out well. We, as I said, generally have 3, and we think it works out well. I think any more than that is probably too much for having a guest on.
Hmm.
It just makes it kind of unwieldy. But it's also really good when you don't have a guest because 3 is sort of enough. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like that, that perfect combo. So let me ask you so you kind of got into this sort of thinking about the early months when, as you said, couple issues were coming out before really the bigger, publication slate. Um, Besides bringing on Jamie, were you thinking about how to sort of structure things once this slate got bigger and bigger, and how many issue or how are you going to give priority to issues, and how are you going to sort of figure it out for those months where it was just a ton of titles?
Yeah.
Bryan thinks about it all the time.
Yeah.
And we've retooled the show. I mean, we probably retooled the show. Some of them are more apparent, but 6 or 7 times since we started. Uh, and yeah, you can speak to that, Bryan.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, some of it is just like the amount of stuff that's being published, and the conceit of the show is we're going to read everything, and, all the superhero comics, and we're going to talk about all the superhero, like anything that's a 616 continuity is part of our remit.
A
So
remit, yeah.
yeah, so
I love having a remit. That makes me
I
so
love a
happy that we
remit.
have. Yeah. Oh man, that's
You guys
great.
sound like lawyers every time you say that.
Yeah. But then there's also sort of like, okay, but like then how do you split them up? So for a while, like when we were in the early 70s, we said, okay, all the monster comics are gonna be their own thing. We're gonna like just push them off to the side and do occasional episodes where all we do is talk about the monster comics. So we've done that. And it's just it is, now I think more than anything, it's like when we have a guest, we'll just build the show around the guest. So, we know we've got this key issue coming up, so let's find someone who wound up writing that series, in their career, or let's, if we can talk to one of the original creators, that's like, as good as it gets. Or, let's just find like a really funny, interesting person who they're a big Jim Starlin fan, or they're a big, whatever. They love the X-Men, so they want to come on and talk about anything X-Men. So, but yeah, I mean, it's a super challenge because we're in 1977 right now, and Marvel's putting out between 25 to 30 books a month that are technically things that we should be covering. So, and we do technically cover them. So, yeah.
And we used to break it up for a while. We had the omnibus episodes where we would talk about maybe three or four, sometimes up to six main issues, and then spend whole nother week, a whole nother episode talking about the rest. And then we realized we were parsing out a lot of time for some not, for some mediocre comics sometimes. So we have tried to get it all, and also we were slowing down our pace, and we often get into a time period and we get hungry for the next thing. Like we wanted to get when Kirby came back. First we wanted to just get through all of Kirby's run, and
Right.
then and then Kirby left and we were worried, but then we realized we had all these other talents. So, and we've all been, researching, discovering so much more as we do this. Like as we really get to know these creators and their output, we get more and more interested. As many of those of us in comic fandom do, until you fall into an actual accidental historian role at a certain point, which is what
Yeah.
I think we've been doing.
I think accidental historian describes it perfectly. Yeah. And also, I mean, we'll always have like the shiny object in front of us, right? Like it's like, oh man, we're like a year and a half away from the start of Frank Miller's Daredevil, and so that kind of becomes the thing that you get tunnel vision about. But then, I'll be looking through the issues that we're going to be covering in a certain month. It's like, do you know Steve Gerber just like wrote a bunch of freeform essays and like had 2-page splashes for an issue of Howard the Duck when he was moving to Las Vegas?
Yeah.
Or like
And a
I feel like
64-page Kiss comic. Yeah.
yeah, it's like I feel like we need to talk about that. So so it's like, okay, hold on, Frank. Like we'll get to you, but first we got to figure out what the hell Steve Gerber was doing here.
Yeah, it's like driving cross country. Like, yeah, you could do that very quickly and it would be fine, but like you're going to want to slow down and look at the weird, roadside attractions along the way.
Yep, that giant ball of yarn. It
Yep.
ain't gonna look at itself. Yeah.
How many of the comics during a given month do you read cover to cover, or how selective are you about which you read in full, which flip through, which you may just read sort of synopses of?
We pretty much read all of them.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
tried to get break our workload up so we could maybe read less, but we all can't help ourselves and read everything
Yeah, that's
everything
right.
that
I forgot we did that. That eroded away like pretty quickly, I
yeah,
think.
it fits our purview to read the, if it fits the could Spider-Man vaguely, possibly, or did appear in this comic book, or someone from the core Marvel universe, then, and it's not a reprint, then we read it. And and yes, we all can't help it. We just read them all every week. We read a month of comics. So yeah.
And I wanted to talk about guests. You already brought it
Mhm.
up that you're kind of looking for guests that fit that, week's theme, I suppose, or the publication slate or whatever you're covering. But when you're having them on, I don't know, it feels like half interview, half really getting to the business of the podcast. Like, how
Mhm.
do you guys think consciously about that balance? Like, how much do we want to just talk to them about their careers versus how much do we want to, really get to the issues at hand?
Yeah, I feel like if we were doing a 100% interview show, I would be totally happy with that. But also, like, I do want to talk about these weird comic, and you get that sort of, that connection with, when you find another person who knows something about this thing that you both care about that you don't know, like that just it makes your nerd senses tingle. Like it is just like the best feeling. So, I mean, and the show is called Marvel by the Month. Like we said, we're going to be talking about every Marvel comic that comes out 1 month at a time. And so, like, I love the interview part of it. I love hearing people's stories. I love, especially if you can get like a Marvel creator from the 70s to tell you anecdotes about what Marvel was like in the 70s. Like Jerry
Mm.
Conway. Oh my gosh. Like that guy, like if you get Jerry in a good mood and he's like looking to open up about stuff, like some of the stories that we got about the Rutland Halloween parade back in the
Oh
day
yeah.
were tremendous. But yeah, I think we just kind of, I don't know. I feel like we've been doing it long enough that we sort of have our format down, but like we're also very excited when a guest wants to take us down a tangent. So,
And also
Have-
like they're comic book people, so like they probably want to talk about the stuff, like
mhm.
they have to live a whole world of life where they don't get to talk about that stuff. I mean, it's kind of like my house with Star Trek. Like all I want to do is talk about Star Trek, but no one in my house really cares about that. So like when the opportunity arises, it's just like, both taps are open all the way and the bathtub's going to flood. Like when you find that person who is so happy to just be able to like talk the talk, like that feels really good for
Yeah,
everybody, I think.
Mhm.
we found, it I don't know, it didn't seem obvious when I was a younger just reader and appreciator of comics, but every person who creates them, especially at a high level, uh, they are they are bigger fans than most people you
Mm,
know. So that's part, and they research, and they know it's really fun to talk about like the, I don't know, Ms. Marvel with Kelly Sue DeConnick and hear her, take on Carol Danvers and all of the iterations up to the point that she made sort of the modern version. And um yeah, those kinds of things are terribly interesting, and it's great when you all mutually read kind of a not great comic together and and get to talk about it too. Sometimes they're great, sometimes they're not, but just sharing those opinions and hanging out. So also it's like a little gauntlet for the guests. Like you've got to read, you don't have to read all of them. There was a while where we made everyone read all the comics for that month. And now we
And
just
people
make them
stopped
read.
returning emails.
I was gonna say.
So yeah, now
Um,
it's limited to just a few for guests, and then we
Yeah.
read
yeah.
the rest.
Have you guys calculated out how long it would take to get to the modern era, or to get to today?
Yeah, we figured this out. I feel like we figured this out a couple of times because we've also changed the format a few times. So now it takes us about 2 weeks per month of comics, I think, at the pace we're on right now. So that winds up being, approximately 2 years a year per year. So yeah, I mean, we worked it out. The long and the short of it is we realized like we'll all be dead before we finally catch up.
We can't catch up unless they stopped making Marvel comics right now.
Yeah.
There's no possible way. So this will be a gem that we can pass on to, I guess, Brian and Jamie's children so that they can
Yes.
carry it on.
My kid who loves comic books and could not give less of a damn about superhero comics. So good luck with that.
Well, the titles also, I mean, you guys are talking about going from like, 2 and 3 to 25, 30. I mean,
Yeah.
it gets even bigger than that. I mean, double, triple at
Yeah.
some point. So how do you even keep up with that? But, that's a problem for, generations
Yeah,
beyond ours.
that's
That's
Brian in 10 years problem to figure out. Yeah.
maybe 5 years we'll start having to divvy up some, title by titles. Like think about the editorial breakdown at Marvel or something,
Hmm.
and start to reflect. Jamie's
Yeah.
covering the X books,
Yeah,
and
we
it's covering,
Marvel by the Minute was a controversial feature that we did for a while, where we ran down a lot of Marvel comics, and each one we gave ourselves a minute
with a
to, like
timer.
on a
Yeah.
stopwatch.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of fun, but it leads to a lot of gibberish and like is there value in it? I don't know. Is it fun? Absolutely, but it's also sweaty and but that was like one way that we at least temporarily dealt with a lot of comics.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it sounded a lot like talking to your friend who did a lot of different drugs all at once. So
Or the Micro Machines man. if we
Yeah,
remember correctly.
exactly.
Yeah.
You see, if any of us had that skill, then it would have gone a lot smoother. But yeah, we could barely talk at normal speed. Uh, I mean, fortunately, we with our timeline where it's at right now, and fortunately for us, unfortunately for the comics creators of the late '70s, the late '70s comics industry is about to almost completely implode. So the title count's going to go down for a few years
Yeah.
dramatically. So that's going to make our jobs a little easier. It's like, sorry, guys, from 48 years ago.
A little respite though for you guys, which
Yeah,
is all
yeah,
that counts now. I
Yes.
mean, we're living in the now, so don't
yeah.
worry
I mean,
about
Right,
they
right.
they all did
they
okay.
all paid their
Yeah,
dues. Yeah.
yeah.
So you guys have been doing this for a while now, and you've seen, at least a portion of Marvel history in this chronology. Have you noticed any, specific patterns, trends in terms of the creative evolution of Marvel, in, looking back on the years that you've and the months that you've done so far?
Hmm. I think that it really there's of course there's an ebb and flow, and what we've found, and I think this carries through to the modern day, is like often when the adults are out of the room, um, where people are free to experiment and try stuff around like the fringes, that's when you get some really interesting stuff. That's when you get Chelsea Kane's Mockingbird and Matt Fraction's Hawkeye and like Howard the Duck originally. Like you can draw a straight line to like when editorial has to do other stuff, you get some craziness that leaks in, and sometimes it's brilliant. Not always, and that is a thing also. But yeah, it's like too much editorial control doesn't seem to lead to greatness, and no editorial control can also be a problem. So like, there's this like sweet spot.
Yeah. One thing we also say a lot on the show is Marvel never throws anything away. Like they will stick with a character for years, for decades, until they finally figure out here's how we're going to make this character work. I mean, like the first and probably, most famous example is the Hulk. He got 6 issues of a comic. Every issue, he had a different power set and a different way of turning into the Hulk and turning back into Bruce Banner. They couldn't crack it in 6 issues. They canceled the series. He becomes a supporting character, shows up in the Avengers, quits the Avengers. Eventually winds up being, half of a split book. They don't even figure out Hulk, Banner turns into Hulk when Banner gets angry thing for several years after that. And then finally the penny drops and, the Hulk becomes one of their three biggest characters of all time.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. And so, so that's kind of like the big example. But then you've also got like, you know, Captain Marvel is a character they keep trying to reinvent and reinvent and
Oh
reinvent.
man.
It's like, well, maybe he's cosmic, maybe he's not cosmic, maybe he's paired with Rick Jones, maybe he's not paired with Rick Jones.
Yeah, that
Um,
poor bastard. He really, he really, like, sometimes it's a little subtle where they're like kind of trying a new thing, but that with him, it was just like, oh man, like I don't know, every 6 issues or something like that, they would like completely reboot the book, or then he had crazy abilities, and it just never really stuck. I don't know. So I like Starlin's run on it was great, but
mhm.
did he leave? Why did that go on for longer? Because it felt successful. I
Yeah,
don't remember.
Jim leaves Marvel a lot and then comes back and then leaves again. It's an ongoing thing. Yeah.
I think we see, yeah, to that point we see all the trends. We get excited when we see like, oh, this is Daredevil swinging through a gritty New York. Like it's not Frank Miller yet, but we see the precursor. It
Hmm.
might even been recently, like some of the stuff Jim Shooter wrote. It was, and I think Bob Brown was doing the pencils,
Hmm.
but it was just suddenly we're like, oh, we can see that this character is about to finally hit its stride, like its optimum model, and
Yeah.
uh,
Right.
and and these are the things working toward it, and so that's pretty exciting. And then there's also just stuff where, we're like, oh, we got to read Iron Man again, and then eventually there's a really great Iron Man comic just sticking out in the middle of just this fallow field of nonsense that we've read. So, and we can really identify those because we're reading all of them. We're reading the whole line that month. We've read everything that happened before it. So having all that knowledge, I think that's why we also can't stop ourselves from reading all the comics that are on our plate every week, just to see, sort of keep up on the stories, even the really bad runs of Submariner, which were hilariously bad sometimes in the early days. And sometimes they're so bad that we start to love them anyway. It's just, and that could be Stockholm syndrome too. But
Well, it's
it
also
is.
like
Yeah.
it's like eating popcorn or pretzels. Like you never, the reason you keep grabbing is because one of them's going to be really salty, and you're like, a part of your brain is just like waiting for that one that's like so good. And so you'll just keep reaching when, you'll just keep reading the saga of Naga and Namor, for 20,000 issues, waiting for that one where I literally can't name a good issue of Namor off the top of my head, but I'm sure there was one,
Yeah.
Had to be.
there
Yeah.
had to
Well,
have been.
and for our purposes, it's like the two things that we really want are a really great issue of a comic or a really terrible issue of a
Right.
comic. It's like something that is just sort of like a middle of the road, like, well, here's 20 pages we put out this month. There's no hook there. We can't talk about it. So those are the ones we kind of steer away from. But yeah, if you've done a really bad job, we are excited to celebrate you.
Right.
Well, you guys have mentioned a few of them already, but I'd love to know if there are characters or creators that you maybe did not have an affinity for, coming into this project that all along the way during this sort of chronological review, you've started to develop an appreciation for
Mm.
characters, creators, stories that you may not have, sort of had an affinity for before.
Rob,
Yeah,
you look
it's
like you
easier
got
to
what?
answer. Yeah, the opposite is an easier thing to answer.
What's it go
Like,
for?
Something that you like
like,
that you now have less of an appreciation
yeah. Which, yeah, we
or
named it
someone.
before. Is Iron Man is incredibly mediocre for so long, for just epic stretches of time, and I don't understand how it limped along, doing almost nothing for it just such an incredible period of time.
Decades.
Yeah,
I would
um,
say,
yeah,
yeah,
go ahead.
that Bryan and I were like, both of us knew and appreciated Jack Kirby as a contributor to Marvel, but we weren't sure when we started that we fully got it. I think we both, like, as we started reading those comics and as we started to realize the pantheon that he created, and then another pantheon and another pantheon, uh, and comparing him to the styles of the time, he obviously, there's no doubt that guy is a just unparalleled genius. So that became a pretty simple kind of low hanging fruit. But for me, Gene Colan,
that's a good
that
answer.
his art, he was just off of my radar. I knew that there was somebody who did early Tomb of Dracula and it looked wispy and cool, but I didn't know how much I was gonna love it and see him doing Daredevil and see him doing whatever else. Just if he did Namor, he did some great Namor, great looking Submariner comics. I wouldn't say that the stories were great, but they looked great. So
Mhm.
he is. I become just a huge fan of Gene Colan's through this time. I mean, and Mike Plug. There's a bunch of artists as we move along. I keep finding new things to love.
Yeah. Um, I think like a creator who was on my radar, but not to the degree that he has since become and has guested on the show a couple times was Steve Englehart. Like, I was
Yeah.
aware that he had a really good run on Captain America. I'm a Avengers was like my first Marvel love, so I was familiar with the history of the Avengers and things like that. But like as we're going through, it's like, oh my God, Steve Englehart wrote this, and he's the guy who turned the Beast into the furry beast, and he's the guy who did the celestial. It's like you realize like all these. He had this prolific stretch for about 5 years in the mid '70s where he just could not miss. Like everything he was coming out with just killed. And yeah, and like I said, he's been very generous with his time for us. So it's like I was already a fan of his work just from reading it for the show, and then to you meeting someone whose work you admire can be a little bit of a crapshoot. We've had very good luck in that I think everyone we've talked to has just been couldn't have been more pleasant. But yeah, it was just great to to get that kind of personal interaction with him too, and just be be able to tell him how much we enjoyed his stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I got one.
Go.
Frankenstein.
Oh yeah.
Frankenstein's great. Who knew? Who had any idea that a
Yeah.
Frankenstein comic book would be good? I think my like larger answer is that kind of like non-superhero comics are like can be way more interesting than I would have thought. And like I have a tendency to assume that a comic is a superhero comic. Even some of the X by the month or M by the our little sub series that we do, um, Skull of the Slayer, things like that. Like I assumed were still superhero comics, even though they weren't, you know? Um, and so anything like that, where it's sort of breaks the formula, can be really interesting and is worth a shot. And that sort of exposure was really great for me because I guess I was a lot more myopic than I thought.
Yeah, and I think I was saying Gene Colan, but Tomb of Dracula has been a consistently mind-blowingly good comic, especially compared to everything around it each month. Like that's just a treat every month to read, and I didn't much care or follow. I knew I'd seen some cool art, but I didn't realize why people, especially people of my dad's generation, were like, this comic kicks ass. And, you know, I finally was like, okay, I get it. I get it now. It does. And I wish I had read it sooner and knew about that. And to Jamie's point, I would have had more tangents into non superhero comics. And I mean, that eventually happened through like Vertigo, in the DC universe, as all of that started to explore different things and mythologies and ideas, and of course Alan Moore blew my mind 4 billion times. That was like a whole different awakening outside of the superhero genre.
Yeah. This was sort of almost a precursor to that, at least in your minds, having not, read it as deeply before.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, let's diverge into the weird and WTF. Do you have good examples during this journey of, some comics, either individual issues or just, series that just kind of was off the beaten path? You would not, it was just odd, weird, just you found it strange. Something that, was just sort of a buried discovery.
Yeah, so one of the things that we've started doing with the current season that we're on right now, because each month of comics, there's so many comics to get through, to make the workload a little bit more manageable. Basically, every other week we put out a a month episode. So, June of 1977 or whatever. And then on the off weeks, what we've been doing is we've been taking deep dives into series that are sort of on the fringes of Marvel continuity. Like they're technically in continuity, but they're so separate from the larger Marvel universe that it actually makes more sense to cover them sort of discreetly. So we'll do like 3 issues at a time of that. And we've done a few of these so far this season. The first one we did um, was Kill Raven in a series that we called Martian by the Month. And so we went through the whole Kill Raven saga that Don McGregor wrote. And it was, that was, we were big fans of his Panther's Rage storyline. And like Kill Raven was something I had no familiarity with at all. And really loved getting into that. And then we've also done, oh, what else? We did uh,
Skull the
Marooned,
Slayer.
but yeah, we did Marooned by the Month, which was Skull the Slayer, which that was bonkers. I mean,
Yeah, that was crazy.
talk about a comic where no 2 issues thought they were in the same comic. Like it was wild, and it just kept like raising the stakes and getting weirder. And it only lasted what, like 8 issues. And they're like, oh, the sales guys won't let us do this anymore. And then we just wrapped up a little mini series that we called Mortality by the Month, where we covered the War is Hell comics, which was Chris Claremont's first ongoing series that he scripted for Marvel. And it was, War is Hell started out as a war reprint comic, and then the last 7 issues wind up being this sort of Final Destination meets Quantum Leap mashup where you have a disgraced soldier who's killed in the invasion of Poland, and his spirit like jumps into the bodies of other people who were killed during World War II, and he
On
has to
all sides. Yeah.
sort of like fulfill some sort of objective to be able to, I don't know, leave that person's body and then go on to the next thing. But it's like it's very grim, and it's very strange. So yeah, I mean, those are the three that stand out most to me, I think.
Yeah, we
Um,
have a what we call a wall of shame. We have
Oh yeah.
we collect, we go at at a Comic-Con, we will go looking, we'll go diving through bins to find like we were talking about Submariner. There's a specific issue of Submariner. I don't think we didn't get it last time, did we? We
no, we
found
tried.
a
Yeah.
too expensive copy, but it's like issue 16 or something, and it stars this crab clawed villain called Crustatos, who we became enamored by, but it Crustatos is all an illusion, so he's not even an actual character. So he's it's part of the Serpent Crown saga in Namor, but so it's just so absurd, and we're like we got invested in this character on the cover who isn't real at all and it isn't an actual character, and his name's called out, so there's also like a glowing radioactive bones of a horse, we call ghost horse, skull bones horse, um and in a Daredevil comic that we had to collect that one too. So we start seeking out these very weird yeah, issues, characters, often villains, where just something ridiculous happened and we love it so much. There's what's the other Daredevil when he we call that the fat garbage Thor, where
Oh,
Daredevil
right.
Daredevil puts on a skin suit
Over his
over
costume.
over his
Yeah.
costume, which is over his Mike Murdock outfit, over being normal Matt Murdock, and
Right.
then he puts a Thor costume over that. So he's impersonating Thor with like plastic pink skin, and that's not on the cover, but that was definitely a standout moment in that where we're like, this man has 5 layers on and he's impersonating Thor. Yeah, it was bonkers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Multiple identities. Yeah, on top of each other. That's pretty crazy. Reminds me of the I don't know if you guys grew up reading Wizard. They would always have Mort of the Month,
Yeah.
which sort of,
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
the characters that were probably forgotten for a reason, but
Yep.
they
Hmm.
brought them up. Yeah. Those were great. So let's talk about sort of listener slash viewer interaction. Do you find, among your followers and subscribers that a lot of folks are kind of reading these things along with you? They're along for the ride, and what kind of questions and thoughts do you get from them, and do they inform what you do on the show?
Yeah, I would say like as soon as we realized that we actually had listeners, we're like, oh no, we gotta we have to actually do this
We might
seriously.
have to try. Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of our listeners, I would say, are a little bit older than us and were folks who remembered, reading these comics as they were coming out, which is very cool to have that sort of perspective on them. Where we've got, we definitely have some very loyal listeners who they're like, this is you're just getting to the point where I started buying Marvel comics off the stands, and I'm reliving them as you're talking about them, and that's like such a cool thing because I know like when we get into the early mid '80s, like that's going to be me, and I'm so excited for that. But yeah, I mean, the other thing is that like there's people who like we have a fan base, I would say, with some folks in it who are very, very, very uh, educated about comics history generally and Marvel history in particular. So, we'll put an episode up and then we'll get a bunch of comments on Patreon or on Instagram or wherever. And they'll just be like, "Oh, did you know this? Or you should have mentioned this, and all this." And it's like, yeah. So it's like even after, we've never tried to set ourselves up as experts. Like, our vibe is that we're experiencing a lot of the stuff for the first time, and we're just giving like our reactions to it as if we were reading it at the time. But it's also like, as we're sort of ourselves inadvertently becoming accidental historians, then we have all of our fans who are giving us more information about it. And that's really cool. Where we have this like kind of virtuous circle where it's like, hey, and some of them have even been like, there's a thing coming up in Defenders that I can't wait till you get there because, and that sort of clues us in. It's like, okay, so when we get close to that, we should probably pay more attention because they're expecting
Yes.
us to be able to refer to that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that Marvel Unlimited it makes it so also there's another swath of readers who sort of pick up and read some of them,
Yeah.
Mhm.
some of the issues that they're interested in. And I think there's a lot of listeners that just don't read any of these, but just like to
Hmm.
hear us talk about them and hear them described and sort of learn it that way without having to do the painful thing that we've been warned against, that Douglas Wolk warned everyone against as he wrote his book All of the Marvels. Don't do what we're doing. It's madness. I think if Brian and I, if this podcast existed, we probably would listen to this podcast and maybe had talked about something totally different to make our own podcast, but it didn't, and it just seemed like it seemed approachable when we started, and but yeah, I don't really have a read on how many, like what the percentage of our listeners are, either they've read all these, they're comic experts, they keep up with us. We do have, quite a vocal base of people that we interact with quite often that do, and they are also insane, and we love them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like you're getting a lot of well, you're giving a lot of value to them. So even if they haven't read all of these issues, which I would imagine a vast majority have not read at least all of them, but you can pick out, what's good if they want to go back. They have Marvel Unlimited. They want to, rifle through the bins and find the gems. You guys are sort of unearthing them, doing a little bit of the work for everybody. So we thank you for the public service
we
that you're
we used
providing.
Yeah, we will sometimes say that we read them all so that you don't have to.
Yeah,
Exactly.
right,
So
right.
Yeah.
yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, it's like how quickly does the average person consume a comic book? Like so in terms of efficiency, you're getting a lot of story condensed, you can get 25, 30 issues consumed in 2 hours, give or take, that's
Right.
awesome. Who would
Yeah.
turn that down?
And then if you turn the speed up to two or three times,
Now you're
Jamie
talking
style.
now it's super
2.6,
fit. It's just like
2.7.
right into the veins. So what are you looking forward to? I mean, obviously you're going, full steam ahead chronologically. We're not going
Yep.
back anymore. You're at 77, right? Right
Hmm.
now. What are the eras, the storylines, the creative teams you are most looking forward to in the next, I don't know, I guess few years? We'll try to give it a little bit of a larger timeline.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we are 1 second away from John Byrne landing with Claremont in the X-Men. They've been working together on Iron Fist, which is also crazy good at this point with the two of them. Um, Iron Fist suddenly became a pretty awesome comic book, and even the Champions, that was another challenge. Just a quick aside, like the Champions, which is like a hodgepodge team that um, it shouldn't exist, but but suddenly, like one of our listeners said, I challenge you this month, John Byrne becomes the artist on the book. Can you say that Champions has become adequate? And we did have to agree that it became adequate and stayed there.
Yeah,
It remains
yeah,
there
yeah,
High
as long as
high
he's
yeah,
been around.
praise.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
Its adequacy has maintained a consistent level since that day.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much stuff like late '70s, early '80s that I'm very excited to check out. I you already referenced, Miller's Daredevil. Super excited for that. I think I have never read through the entire shooter run of Avengers, and we've just started that, so that's pretty exciting. Walt Simonson is my absolute creator of all time. And so we're right now reading the era of Thor where he was illustrating it, and Tony DeZuniga was inking, and Len Wein was still writing the comic. But we're a few years away from where Simonson gets to do the whole shebang himself, and I'm super excited for that. And then some of the like other like kind of weird sort of fringier series that we'll probably cover in off weeks. We've got things coming up like Shogun Warriors and Rom and what else? Like
Micronauts, probably not
Micronauts is
in the
coming
80s.
up.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
loved
yeah.
Micronauts. So yeah,
Yeah, so like a lot of these licensed comics from when Marvel didn't realize that there would be a problem, having a license they would hold temporarily, and then just like let's integrate this character really robustly into the entire universe, and didn't consider it's like, oh, at some point we
Yank.
may want to
Yeah.
reprint these things, and
yeah.
so yeah.
I hear you. Jamie?
Uh, Onslaught's coming up soon, right? I get to read Onslaught
Sure,
soon.
not even close.
A hop, skip, and a
Maximum,
jump.
yeah, maximum clonage,
Right.
force works,
I
all
think
that
we should
stuff.
also mention that I think at this point in the show, in our timeline, Rob and I have been born, but Jamie hasn't. So yeah, he's
That's right. That's right.
yeah, yeah. But
Well,
yeah, there's got to be
yeah,
some '80s stuff that you're pretty excited about.
Oh, I mean, all the like Phoenix has started already. So like that, the rise and fall of that, I'm very excited about. Um, I mean, I read X-Men Classic a lot when I was a kid,
Hmm.
and I'm sure I read Uncanny when I Marvel Unlimited came out, but it's all a pre-COVID blur at this point. So
Hmm.
I like it's going to feel really fun to revisit that stuff
Yeah.
again for the first time, kind of thing.
Well, as we come to a little bit of a close here, I'd love to know from each of you, what is one thing that you've learned doing the podcast that you think every Marvel fan should know that they may not know?
Mm.
Whoa. Hmm.
I'll
I
give
would
everybody some
say that
time.
Yeah.
no, I got it. I can start babbling and I'll buy some time. It sounds I for me, I always read the comics that I read regardless of who was making them. Like that was not a factor in anything. Like sometimes I would start to recognize a style and be like, "Oh, I kind of like that." And then I would see it somewhere else and be like, "Oh, that's the Generation X guy." That's a bad example. I don't like the Generation X guy. But like it like or this podcast has taught me that um, follow the creators. Like the people who you like are making cool stuff, regardless of it if it's Batman or whatever. Like it's fine. Like you can just follow an artist or a writer or even an editor. Like they all do the type of stuff that you like, and they do it in different flavors, and that can be really rewarding to see like the breadth of someone's work. Um, and it'll surprise you a lot of times. I like got who was it? Oh, both Chip Zdarsky and Matt Fraction. I got like completely wrong because my view of them again was like super myopic because I was just reading the same type of stuff and they just like poked their head in and like did their version of that thing. But then when released off the chain to do other stuff, like it's super interesting.
I think one thing we've learned is that deadlines are um they're unforgiving, and the main thing about, and it's something we try to do with the podcast too, is we put out a podcast every week, and Marvel put out comics every month, and sometimes those months were tough to get a comic out, to have everyone working on it. But so we try to be, I mean, even when we're making fun of something, we can often tell that we're trying to be gracious, and we know that this was, we try to estimate, like, I think maybe this was inked in one half of a day before it needed to be print, colored and sent off to print. So we can see that a lot more too. Seeing the whole bulk of the work, you can tell where the pain points are, and then you can almost immediately hear something about it in the letters pages, or somebody's pulled to another book, somebody had an emergency, whatever it is. It just, the fact that these things come out, uh, and did come out regularly, is a miracle. That, and so even somebody who's the worst somebody who you like the least, or a title you like the least, Invaders, Jamie.
Uh,
You still can appreciate their work and what they put into it and what they care about. And so mine's, I guess, more holistic, and I also then started seeking out the like early work of people like Wally Wood. And uh so finding like EC books with these artists that I'm like, this art style kicks butt, and then starting to go back and back and back and see where all these guys came from and what they were doing early on.
Yeah.
So again, that follows Jamie's thread though. Like if you find an artist that's cool, follow their thread, and sometimes that thread's going to lead you back to the 1940s. But it's great. It's worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's been really, really fun to watch these, kind of household name creators come up, where you see like Barry Windsor Smith's first stuff in Avengers, where
Or
he's just doing
Daredevil
like,
even. Yeah.
yeah, and Daredevil, like, yeah, he's like sitting on a park bench, doing a Kirby riff, and uh, and then
Giffen
yeah,
we're seeing now
yeah,
in
yeah,
Defenders.
exactly. So that's all, I just to echo what Rob and Jamie were saying, it's like, yeah, like watching the evolution of an artist is super fun. But I would say like one of the things that I would caution Marvel readers, I think um the secret sauce of Marvel is not really much of a secret. It's the idea that this is all one universe and one shared continuity, and it's all part of one big story, and everything takes place in the same world. Which, yeah, I mean, technically, it does do that, but it's possible to go too hard in that direction, and like to just try to make everything fit just right. And when you see
mm,
that effort happening, that's generally not a good instinct. Like it generally leads to some pretty. It's what Tom Brevoort would call comics about comics. Where it's like, yeah, I mean, this is for those of us, who are a little on the spectrum. This does satisfy. It tickles, that little nerve in our brains. It's like, oh no, it all fits perfectly. But I would say,
at,
like,
at what cost?
yeah, yeah. I think it was Matt Fraction who uh, kind of laid it out for us, where he was like, basically his approach and the approach of his peers when they were doing their Marvel stuff was, it's like, well, know the continuity, be familiar with the history of all this. You don't have to slavishly check every box. It's like there's some stuff, like whatever you're doing, just make sure it doesn't directly contradict anything, but you don't have to service 50, 60 years of continuity in your story. You can do your own thing and have your own spin on it. And that's, I think DC, just by nature of its structure, has used this to good effect, where you'll have these DC stories that are kind of unstuck in time and continuity, where they become these perennial sellers. Like, Dark Knight Returns is still selling trade paperbacks, almost 40 years after it came out. Whereas Marvel has fewer of those. And I think the continuity can be as much of a millstone as it can be sort of an easy way to get a kid to go from buying one book a month to buying 40, which
Hmm.
is what happened to me.
Guilty, yeah, guilty as
Yeah.
Yeah.
charged.
It seems to have happened in the movies as well, I have
Yeah.
to say,
Yeah.
and hopefully we're coming out on the other side of it. But yeah, it's movies about other movies and
Yeah.
tying them together, and all the strands and all the complexities there. But I think, knock on wood, we've learned our lessons, and I think they have been learned a little bit more in comics already, considering they've had a longer runway. But that, just tell a good story, keep the foundation there, but you don't have to do that much fan service. You don't have to do that much continuity to tell a good story. So,
Yeah, yeah,
100%.
and I think that's what they've built the core of the MCU, um, and maybe one would argue overbuilt the core.
mhm.
But the fringes, like the Werewolf by Night or something like that, like it's similar to the comics. We can see these these edge things percolate up to actually be part of the MCU, and those are the things that are the most interesting at this point. If you built the core, you can now run around way on the edges of this thing, and it'll still relate, but it doesn't have to be, yet to your point, serving that one story all the time.
Yeah.
And we're back. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Bryan. Thank you, Jamie, for a fun and engaging conversation. We love what you do at Marvel by the Month. You have many more months of Marvel to go. I don't think you're ever going to catch up, but maybe if we extend our lives into the Matrix, you might get there. But we love the journey more than the destination. So good luck. We will be listening. Thank you for being on the show. Thank you all out there for listening and for viewing. Thank you for rating, reviewing, subscribing, going to Patreon. We're also on the Believe Network, BLEAV. So check them out for other great podcasts. And we will see you for the finale of One of Us Week.